Hi, Charlie. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview with us. For our viewers in Argentina and elsewhere, Charlie Kimber is a militant and part of the national leadership of the Socialist Workers' Party of the UK and has been part of the actions against the prohibition of Palestine action, where he was recently arrested along with hundreds of others who came out against this censorship, prohibition, and persecution on the 9th of August. So we thought it was important to be able to interview Charlie in the context of this section of Voices Against Genocide, this series of interviews that's going up in the PRENSA OBRERA YouTube channel. So thank you, Charlie. And just to start off, maybe to draw something of a balance sheet of these 2 years of demonstrations in the UK in particular, and where we're at today in the struggle for a free Palestine.
Well, thank you, comrade, and hello, welcome, and solidarity to everybody who will be listening to this, I hope, in solidarity with the Palestinians and their struggle against imperialism. I suppose the last 2 years has been one that has confirmed the ravening fury of imperialism against the Palestinian people and the importance of Israel to the West, to the United States, but also to the country where I happen to live, in Britain, to Germany, to France, to Italy, and to many others. So that we have seen the world divided, haven't we? Between huge numbers of people, hundreds of millions of people who stand with the Palestinians, and a fairly tiny group that stand unflinchingly with Israel and its imperialist allies. And in Britain, on the 11th of October, we will have our 32nd national demonstration in support of the Palestinians. That's pretty impressive, 32 demonstrations in 104 weeks. The smallest of those has been about 80,000 people. The largest was nearly 1 million people. And our calculations in the Socialist Workers' Party is that something like 4 million people in Britain have been on a local or national demonstration in support of the Palestinians. That's an extraordinary movement. It's an even bigger movement in terms of how long it's gone on for than the movement against the war in Iraq that was headed up by Tony Blair, we'll hear more of him later, and George Bush. And it has created new political facts in Britain. It's split the Social Democratic Party, the Labour Party. It led to the election of a group of independent MPs in July of last year. And most importantly, it's been a learning curve for huge numbers of activists. Vast numbers of people now, if you talk about 1948, they know what you're talking about. If you talk about 1917 and the Balfour Declaration, where Britain played its bloody role in laying the basis for the Israeli state, lots and lots of people know about this as well. They can talk about 1967. They can talk about the history of the PLO. They can talk about the Oslo Accords. This has been an extraordinary moment for very, very many people. There's no doubt that the government has been very shaken by it, by the scale of it. And early on, they thought they could crush it by threats of repression. So at one point, the Conservative government, as it then was, said that it would be a crime to wave a Palestinian flag or to chant from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. They said this would be illegal. And then, of course, the trouble was there were 500,000 people waving Palestinian flags and 600,000 people chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. And they could do nothing about it. They could do nothing about it. And they've hoped that the movement would go away. The movement has not gone away. It's not gone away because the killing has continued. The starvation regime has got worse. The genocide has been called out by more and more and more people, and the movement has grown. And therefore, quite recently in July, they banned Palestine Action, a direct action group, which has taken on the job of attacking factories that produce material for the Israeli military. Companies like Elbit, who work directly for the Israeli military. They go in and they smash up the factories. They don't attack individuals, they don't attack people, they attack the property. On the 5th of July, though, they were declared a terrorist organization. Now, I wish, and this is the great problem with the Palestine movement in Britain, we have huge movement on the streets, but the level of workplace action has been very, very limited. Activists have tried to do workplace action, but it's not anything on the scale of what we've seen recently in Italy. Fantastic, the strikes and demonstrations and blockades in Italy, or in the Spanish states, or in France. We've not seen anything like that, regrettably. Instead, the response to the banning of Palestine Action has been people often motivated by pacifist views about non-violence, people who were engaged in environmental protests at an earlier period, people inspired by views of the Quakers in Britain and so on, and a number of people who are on the left and Palestine activists have sat holding cardboard signs saying, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action." Silently, or most have been silent. People like me aren't silent, but anyway, most people are silent. And then you are arrested for Section 13 of the Terrorism Act. A very serious offence, by the way. We weren't sure when we first got arrested whether we'd been arrested under Section 13, which means you can go to jail for 6 months, or Section 12, which means you can go to jail for 14 years. I'm glad to say I was arrested under the one you can go to jail for 6 months for, not 14 years. But, you know, if you're young, it's a real problem. You won't get a job in lots of places if you've got a terrorism conviction. You can't travel to the United States or to Australia or to Japan, a number of other countries as well, with the terrorism. It's a big thing. Nonetheless, on the first day, 29 people were arrested for holding these signs. That's what people do. They hold up a cardboard sign and they're arrested under the Terrorism Act. And then it grew. On the day that I was arrested, 532 people were arrested. And on the 6th of September, 880 people were arrested. And I've just come now, I'm speaking to you on October the 4th. I've just come from the latest protest in Trafalgar Square in London, where the police began arresting people 6 hours ago and are still grabbing them off the streets to fill the jails with them. 1,600 people arrested before today. It will be well over 2,000. It's extraordinary.
Charlie, is that just in this form of protest and solidarity with Palestine Action? So the charges against others protesting for Palestine or making statements would probably be larger?
Yeah, it would be more than that. Although I have to say that the size of the movement means that there have not been big arrests on the major demonstrations. Because it's quite a problem for the police to try and arrest people if there's 200, 300,000 people on a demonstration. It's not easy for them. It's why they can't do anything about the flags. It's why they can't do anything about the placards. When the government minister said it will be illegal to have on a placard, "From the river to the sea, Palestine will be free," I was then the editor of Socialist Worker, our newspaper. We put it on the front of the newspaper and we made a placard out of it. And I knew absolutely that no one was going to come for us because there were too many people. Their hope now is that they can move into the, it's much easier to go for a few people than a huge number of people. So there is this repression, but I have to say, it's causing splits inside sections of the ruling class. The cops, the police are nervous about their ability to keep doing it. Now, that's not because I have any illusions in the police. No, this is repressive arm of the state. It's bodies of armed men, etc., as Lenin talked about. But they are a bit overwhelmed by it. And they are looking to ways of how either they're going to get even nastier. So recently, the people who organize Zoom calls for supporters of this form of action were arrested under a different part of the Terrorism Act. They face prison sentences of between 6 and 9 years for holding a meeting in support of an illegal organization. That's, for holding a Zoom meeting of people who wanted to hold a cardboard sign. You could go to prison for 9 years. I mean, it's extraordinary, and it underlines something that lots of people have learnt in these last 2 years. We have an increasingly authoritarian, genocide encouraging government. And that was true under the Conservatives, who were the government before July 2024. And it's true now under the Labour government of Keir Starmer. In some ways, indeed, the repression has increased under the Labour government. It wasn't, Palestine Action were not outlawed under the Conservative government, under the right-wing government, outlawed under the Social Democratic government of Keir Starmer. And this is something that goes to the heart of the matter, because millions of people in Britain say the crime is to support genocide. It's not a crime to protest against genocide. This is a very simple argument. Who are the terrorists? Are the terrorists people like myself, 68 years old, sitting in Parliament Square or Trafalgar Square with a bit of cardboard saying, I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action? Are we the terrorists? Or are the terrorists Benjamin Netanyahu, Donald Trump, Keir Starmer, and so on? This is a very simple argument, but one that cuts through with huge numbers of people in Britain, particularly young people, particularly those who've been on the marches, but also much wider than that, people who want to defend protest rights, who want to defend trade union rights, who want to defend our right to stand up and say the government is wrong without being dragged off. So it's a very big question, and it shows how, I think Palestine has disrupted everything. Palestine has disrupted everything. It's disrupted the government. It's disrupted, quote, ordinary politics. It's created new movements here, and it's led to new arguments about how we change society and so on. The missing element here, and I will be honest with you about this, is we have not yet had enough workplace action. We've done wonders. We've put millions in the streets. We've shaken the government. People have shown massive courage over the being prepared to be arrested under the terror laws and so on. But we haven't yet won. We haven't yet won. What would winning look like? It would be breaking the British state from its support for the Zionist regime of Netanyahu. It would be stopping all the arms sales to Israel. It would be boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. It would be insisting that we need to break all diplomatic support for Israel, and so on, and so on. Now, we haven't won that. We've done wonders, but we haven't won that. And this is a question about political leadership. It's about who is in charge of the trade union movement, and so on. So that's these 2 years have shown great leaps forward in terms of a social movement, but there's still a lot to be won.
And what's the concrete legal situation of people like you, like the other 1,600 who've been arrested? Are you awaiting trial? How is that being organized? Is there in general, a common legal defense? Is there a campaign around this? As you know, because we've shared some activities here in Argentina, there are some leaders like Vanina Biasi or Alejandro Bodart, and some other teachers or local militants who are being taken to trial, but practically a handful at this point, and none of them are currently serving jail sentences. So this is one form of a very centralized political campaign. It seems it is difficult to organize, or how do you organize when it's such a mass scale of persecution?
Well, the organizers of the cardboard sign protests, if I can call it that, are very, very good at it. Very good at it. We have lots of opportunities to talk to one another, although the state does try and crack down on it to, stop you having a Zoom meeting and so on. And it's well organized, and the state is very slow to bring us to court. To take my case as one, I was arrested on the 9th of August. I wasn't actually charged at the time. I was arrested under the Terror Acts, which makes me, presumably, potentially a terrorist wandering around. But I haven't actually been charged. I was meant to go to a police station on the 22nd of October, formally to be charged, and then I was told, no, we're not going to do that. Actually, we're waiting till the end of January to do that. So it's a strange situation. About 180 people have formally been charged. Some are going to court. The people who face the worst court cases are actually those who have been involved in actions at the factories that were supplying Israel. So there's a group that were originally called the Filton 18, and then they became the Filton 24. Let's not worry about the details, but a group of activists who were involved in an action at a factory supplying Israel in the west of England. They have been held awaiting trial for 15 months. They've been in prison for 15 months, even before their trial. I mean, I'm not speaking to you from a prison cell. I'm out, I have very low level conditions about what I can't do as a result of my arrest. I'm the lucky ones. But those people have been held in prison, even before their trial, of 15 months before the trial starts. So in other words, they've already had a heavy penalty, even without being found guilty of anything. And we're all trying to hold together and support one another. That's the truth. To make sure that when people go to court, there will be support for each other, and that also there are legal cases coming up which could overturn the ban on Palestine action. There's one in November, which it's called a judicial review in Britain, which could declare that the ban was illegal for various reasons. If that overturned the ban, it would be a humiliation for the British government. It would be a victory for the whole Palestine movement. and we'd all be have our cases overturned. But I don't know whether that will happen. You know, this is an authoritarian government that wants to play its role amongst the imperialist world order. It's been shaken, but we know what ruling classes are like. Either they feel they have to retreat, or they can get nastier. And maybe they will go for us. You know, maybe the judges will say that the ban is legal, that all the cases can go ahead, and then we will have to step up the solidarity with each other, with all the people.
An interesting recent ruling ended the legal case against the banned kneecap, right, for coming out in solidarity with Palestine. We've been following from PRENSA OBRERA the attempts at censorship at the festivals and on the BBC, both of them and other bands who have come out in solidarity with Palestine. So it's definitely been interesting how the movement has been able to gain this support from figures from culture and music, and also there seems to be at least some members of the justice system who within the ruling class think it's a bad idea to go on with this level of divide and persecution. It might not be good business for them. It might have been going too far. No?
That's absolutely right. Although it's interesting that the kneecap prosecution was thrown out essentially on a technicality, that the prosecuting authorities had not got their paperwork in on time, which made them look ridiculous, but didn't require them to get rid of the laws under which they were charged. That was quite a handy let-off, I think, because you're right. Kneecap, Bob Vylan, others who cultural figures who have got massive support at festivals in Britain. The government knows this is dangerous, and you see the people who get arrested over the Palestine action ban, there are workers, there are students, but quite a lot of them are what you would see as middle-class people. You know, they're senior doctors, they're retired lecturers, they are small business people. A lot of them are quite old, and the reason for that is because if you're 67 or 68, you're a bit less worried about whether your employer is going to sack you. You may be a bit less worried about whether you ever want to go to Australia or not. So there's a whole layer of people that the judge, some judges, some politicians, media people, they don't really want to upset them. They don't really want to alienate these people. And people say, is it really worth having all these police resources to arrest vicars and 90-year-old pensioners and people in wheelchairs and people who've had no criminal record ever? Are we really saying that all these people are terrorists now? Now, I don't rely on that sort of stuff at all. You know, my view is, in the end, it's about the balance of forces. But there's no doubt it shakes some sections of the people at the top.
Absolutely. So one question I wanted to ask you, you mentioned, of course, the role that Tony Blair has been promoted to play by Trump, and the idea of a military protector, and he's definitely a figure who's been very active in the past as part of the military adventures of British imperialism in Iraq and so on. So do you think that this movement, apart from the solidarity with the specific situation in Palestine and the Zionist enclave, and of course these 2 years of open massacre that we've been seeing on social media, has it also drawn closer to some of these sections of the masses of really questioning the role of the UK as an imperialist power? Has it gone to deeper conclusions in that sense, or more far-reaching?
You see, I think that's a very interesting and the answer is interesting and contradictory to that. There's no doubt at all that it flows into a hatred of what British imperialism did, for example, in Iraq. And, you know, Tony Blair cannot really go anywhere in Britain and do a meeting or a book signing or anything without people turning up and going, you're a war criminal. You should be in The Hague. You should be behind bars. Nobody has forgotten the role he played in murdering hundreds of thousands of people in Iraq in alliance with US imperialism. And Blair, we know that Blair played a global role there. He was a bit of intellectual weight behind the very lightweight George Bush. So he played a very important role in that. It's also true that lots of people involved in the movement have learnt about the history of British imperialism, the empire, and so on. Colonialism. What happened in the Middle East? They connect this to what happened in Africa, what happened in India or Pakistan, or what, you know, lots of people know this now. You talk to people about settler colonialism and people know what you're talking about. But, and there is
one off the coast here in Argentina, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Argentina is one of the most bloody examples. So yes. But it has not led to a questioning, really, of the war in Ukraine. If you talk to most people, they will say what Israel is doing in Gaza and the West Bank, the occupied West Bank, is wrong. What Russia is doing in Ukraine is wrong, and therefore I sort of hear what you say about it being a proxy war and about the role of the West and the role of NATO, but I'm not really sure I'm against British arms going to Ukraine because they're fighting back. They're freedom fighters in some sort of loose way. Now, we think that's wrong, obviously. We were, as yourselves were, against the Russian invasion, but we are against arms to Ukraine. We're against NATO's role. We see this as a proxy war in which the working class has the duty of being against its own rulers everywhere. And this is a contradiction, and I think a lot of it's to do with the wrong analysis of the left in lots of cases, which has provided a justification for British imperialism as well. But in lots of ways, the Palestine movement has taken up the broader questions of imperialism. It's not true about Ukraine, though. And you know that life is contradictory, isn't it? Of course, we try to win more people to this, but you know, it's not a simple argument.
And maybe to end on this point, it's probably contradictory as well, but I think it would be interesting for comrades in Argentina and elsewhere to know how you are seeing what this massive movement for Palestine has brought into political possibilities in the UK, which of course are, you know, coming up against this massive racist force behind Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson. And there are discussions about the possibility of new working class parties or political formation, though they're still very sketchy or confusing, to at least from far away. So maybe the question would be, how does this mass movement relate to the struggle against the far right and to the possibilities of a revolutionary left alternative?
Yeah, those are two really interesting points. Let me start with the question of anti-racism. Obviously, as you have outlined, we have seen a growing far-right party, Reform UK, headed by Nigel Farage, which is in the lead in the opinion polls, 30% and more in the opinion polls, and is winning lots of municipal elections in Britain, by-elections. And it's a real threat, because it's not just an electoral threat. As always, they encourage a street movement. And we've seen, particularly over the last few months, far-right activists and fascists gathering outside places where refugees are accommodated and threatening to attack refugees. We saw a glimpse of that a year before, when there were attacks on mosques and attempts to burn down refugee accommodation. But this summer, it's been much more sustained. Large numbers of people gathering. And then on the 13th of September, Tommy Robinson, who you mentioned, a fascist street army type, put over 100,000 people on the streets of London. Now, we have been involved with others in counter-protests against the far right and the fascists, in defending refugees, in standing up against the fascists, in a serious and continued way. We're involved with others in a group called Stand Up to Racism. We've been engaged for week after week on the streets against them. It hasn't been easy to mobilize the Palestine movement for that, partly because lots of people say, well, my attention is on Palestine. What I'm doing is Palestine. I demonstrate over Palestine. I come out against Palestine. Anything that isn't about Palestine seems a diversion from what I want to do. I think that's shifting. It's shifting because it's obvious how Islamophobic, how anti-Muslim the far right are. They make hatred of Muslims a central element. They wave Israel flags when they are on demonstrations, which is strange for people who are influenced by fascist ideas, but you know, they don't have to be consistent about these questions.
That's definitely consistent internationally, though. Neo-Nazis
yes,
are pro.
absolutely. Yes, because it's anti-Muslim and it's, you know, it's lining up with imperialism. And also there have been attacks, far-right attacks on the Palestine movement recently. You know, physical assaults. And this week, an Israeli government minister put out that they had invited Tommy Robinson to come to Israel because they admired the work he was doing in standing up against radical Islam. So this has connected the question of being for the Palestinians and against Israeli genocide with the question of the far right in Britain. This I think means it's much easier to see how you bring all these elements together, because although the far right are big, our side is much bigger. If you talk about the Palestine movement, you know, we get 300,000 on the streets, not 100,000. I mean, 100,000 is very worrying for the far right and the fascists. I'm certainly not complacent about it, but we can put many more on that for the Palestine movement. But we have to bring the Palestine movement against the far right. Okay, but I think it's possible to bring these two together because their side is coming together. I mean, it's incredible, really. You have this Israeli minister who goes on endlessly about the anti-Semitism of the left and the anti-Semitism of Palestine marchers, inviting Tommy Robinson, who creates a nest of fascists, many of whom are Hitler lovers, around him. And the Israeli government says, you're welcome to come here. You're welcome to, I mean, this is not extraordinary. This is what, you know, they invite Orban from Hungary to come. There's a good friend, isn't it? You know, Trump enables all these vile right-wing figures. Millar, you know, all these people that you can talk about. But I think the prospects are good for that. I want to say something about the Your Party thing, as it's called. This is a new left-wing party, which electoral party, largely, probably at the beginning anyway, which is about to be launched around Jeremy Corbyn, the former leader of the Labour Party, up until 2019, and Zara Sultana, another Labour MP on the left of the Labour Party, who resigned from the Labour Party over Gaza and other issues. And it wouldn't happen without the Palestine movement. It's happening because the Palestine movement broke up sections of the Labour Party and made it possible for people to see how you could construct something outside the Labour Party. This was launched in July, and 800,000 people said they were interested in it. Then there were a whole series of political errors, fallings out at the top, people threatening legal action against one another, and so on and so on. It's quite important, I think, to say that these fallings out are not just about personalities and individuals. They're about politics. They're about the problems of Labourism, which we all know about. The fact that in social democratic parties, who are the really important people? Not the grassroots, not the membership, but the MPs, the people at the top. And some of this has been imported into what's called Your Party. That's its sort of placeholder name. It doesn't actually have a name or a constitution or policies yet. But anyway, it's called Your Party. But the MP bit was imported into it. And electoralism. You know, some people are terrified about, well, we mustn't lose votes, and therefore that we mustn't take on board radical policies or upset anyone who might be going to join Your Party. Now, we're involved in the meetings that will set it up because we see it as a site of contestation, a place of debate, a place of argument. You know, our argument basically is one of saying we need a party that identifies capitalism as a problem, that has radical policies, that puts struggle in the workplaces and the streets and the colleges and the schools before the question of elections, even though elections are important, and that we do want to take on policies like radical action over the cost of living crisis, better wages, price controls, rent controls, saying that refugees are welcome, supporting trans plus and non-binary rights, being anti-Zionist, and so on, a whole number of other questions. This is an argument, it's a huge argument. One of the problems is the incompetence and political failings of those at the top means that it's quite damaged. And as I say, 800,000 people initially said they might be interested in this. Well, they've just opened formal membership of it, and there hasn't been a huge rush to join it. I think a lot of people are, you know, they think what's happening here? It's not very democratic. It's one of the problems. There's very little sense of democracy. It's not guided by the grassroots. Now, there's still a lot of enthusiasm out there for a left alternative to Labour. I still think it's important not to throw our hands up and say this is all finished. And if it links to the movements, to the Palestine movement, to the anti-racist movement, to people's feelings over the attacks on working class living standards and so on, it can still be a big force. But there are very big political questions about it.
Okay, well, thank you, Charlie. I think it's been a very complete panorama. So I want to thank you for your time and wish you the very best in the next actions. I'm sure in London, as in Buenos Aires, as in the whole world, we will be on the streets demonstrating for a free Palestine, for the freedom of the comrades of the flotilla, and against the continuing massacre of the Palestinian people in these days. So this segment, this section is part of the materials we're putting out to prepare for mass demonstration, in our case in Argentina and internationally. And I want to thank you for your time and wish you luck on these next actions.
Thank you very much, comrade. Thank you.